What's up, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Is your host, Nick Giordano. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. For today, I have a great guest coming on. I have former gubernatorial candidate, host of the Andrew Giuliani Show, ABC podcast, and the special assistant to the 45th President of the United States, Andrew Giuliani. Andrew, so glad you could join me. How are you today?
Well, Nick, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on with you. Saw you a couple weeks ago at the Moms for Liberty event in Manhattan, and I got to tell you, I thought you gave an excellent presentation up there, and it was nice to see in such a hostile environment like Manhattan. What I felt was
Was
not
it
just
that hostile with all those protesters outside and the ones that got inside?
I'll tell you what. I mean, I guess you go to Washington D.C. for technically a more hostile environment. I guess 19% did vote for Trump or voted against Bragg, however you want to look at it in these elections in Manhattan. Whereas in Washington, D.C., I think it's only about 4 to 5% or so. But it was just nice to see some people standing up for parental rights, standing up for our children. And it was one of the best evenings that I've had in a while.
Especially in Manhattan, given everything that's going on down there. Because I remember growing up as a teenager and a young adult, your father was the mayor of New York City, and it was a phenomenal place. I mean, it was a place you went, you hung out, you had some fun. Today, I mean, I wouldn't let my kids go down there without me being around. And it really goes to show you how the government officials that people elect actually matter. So, what is your thoughts on what's taking place in the city right now? We just had a few police officers that were beaten by migrants, and then those migrants were released without bail. And then a couple of them were caught on video giving the finger to the people taking the picture of them as they left the courtroom. What's your thoughts on what's happening?
It's chaos, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. And when you see a situation like that where you have illegal migrants, they're being housed in New York on New York City taxpayer dollars, and they have the audacity to go and beat a cop. This is something that the groundwork has been laid in for a while, right? I mean, there's been a total disrespect of the police, and that message has obviously gotten across our U.S. borders, where people see that and say, hey, look, there's not going to be any retaliation if in a place like Manhattan, where you've got a district attorney like Alvin Bragg, who doesn't seem to care about his oath of office, where they'll go and actually beat officers on camera and have the audacity to say, hey, we're not scared about this at all. So to me, it's sadly another brick in what has been laying the foundations of chaos here in Manhattan, in New York City, and in so many of our great cities. And what's so disappointing is, and you laid it out there, and look, I'm obviously biased. I love my father very much. I think he did a fantastic job. But I always say this, Nick, you have narratives, and all politicians, anybody involved in politics has narratives. The way that you determine whether those narratives are fictional or true is by the numbers and by the data. And you could see in the early 90s, New York had over 4 years in a row of 2,000 murders a year. Those numbers within a couple of short years under Rudy Giuliani went below 1,000, and they continued and they stayed and they kept going further and further down, even under Bloomberg. Even the first 2 years under de Blasio, he had Bratton in his police commissioner, and he couldn't screw it up. It's when he decided to let Bratton go, and that's when the de Blasio effect came in. And sadly, we're seeing this continue with Adams now. But it's complete chaos. And the sad thing is, I think it's going to actually have to get worse before it gets better. And that's a scary proposition. And a lifelong New Yorker like myself, who has a young daughter, my wife and I talk all the time, and we wonder, okay, well, what's keeping us in New York City? We both have a love for it. We want to see it get better. And I said this on the campaign trail, my first obligation is to my family. It's to my daughter. It's to make sure that she's safe, that she can receive a good education, and she has a good quality of life. And the more that I look at it unbiasedly, it's very difficult for me to say to myself, to my wife, on behalf of my daughter that New York City provides that at this moment. And that's really heartbreaking because you and I both know that when New York is running on all cylinders, it's the greatest place in the world. As a matter of fact, people will pay a premium. They'll pay more in taxes to live in New York than they would somewhere else. Now, you can't start, adding absurd things like congestion pricing and trying to tax people more and potentially look at reparations. I mean, you have all these things that are starting to, for different families, there are different straws that break the camel's back, and we wonder if that's going to happen to even the Giulianis as well.
Yeah, I think that's going through a lot of people's minds. They have family in New York. That's what kept them here. Their jobs were in New York. But now they're rethinking it. Is the quality of life gotten so poorly that do they remain here or do they leave? And I think that's a struggle that a lot of families are dealing with today. And one of the things that I can't rack my brain around, right? So I'm trying to look at this from an unbiased perspective as well. I look at someone like your father, and he wanted to govern over something special. He wanted to govern over the greatest city in the world and maintain and keep it clean, bring crime down, and make people want to come. What is the logic behind all these policies that have turned New York City into a cesspool amongst the government officials? I mean, we just had the city council overriding Mayor Adams' veto pertaining to police officers and how police officers must now stop at every single encounter and they have to fill out reports of every single interaction they have, hampering their job to responding to actual crimes. What is behind these policies? I mean, if I'm a government official, I don't want to govern over crap. I want to govern over something that's good, that people like, people enjoy.
Yeah, you take a lot of pride in your work when you do that. I think it's simple. I think, honestly, the Democratic establishment in New York City, they're more concerned with being primaried by the Democratic Socialists than they are of losing their job to a Republican in many of these districts. And that's why when you look at this bill that's going to tie up police officers at a time, by the way, Nick, when you look at where we are with our police officers right now, you have some of the biggest law enforcement classes hitting their 20-year mark over the last couple of years. And now, because after September 11th, you had some of the biggest classes in the mid 2000s of the NYPD. They're all hitting their 20-year mark. And I got to tell you,
And it was a great job back then because you were respected and the crime was low.
exactly. And very few of them are saying they want to go past their 20 years. As a matter of fact, I've heard a lot more saying they're not even going to go to their 20 years and retire beforehand. But what's happening is where you might have been getting 2,000 recruits or so a year, now you're getting less than 600, and they have to actually decrease the standard. So a mile and a half run, which you need to run in 14 miles. Look, I'm definitely a little out of shape myself. I think I could barely make the 14 miles right now. If I trained a week and a half, I would be able to do that. So the fact that you have these standards being taken away for the graduates of our police officers, the reason why they ended up doing that is because they're not getting enough recruits in the first place. So it's not even a matter of some of those great police academy classes, which learned so much and saw how exactly you can make the city a better, safer place, are leaving. You're losing quality, you're losing quantity of officers, and now they're being hamstrung even more to actually have to do more paperwork on something as simple as if a tourist may ask about directions potentially. So it's I don't understand where it comes from, but the more that I see of it, Nick, the more I just wonder if there's a real belief on the left in some circles that they want to completely look at the broken windows idea, quality of life, policing, and say, you know what, we have to rewrite the history books of this, because if we make this successful, then we're not going to be able to push through many of our progressive policies. So I think that's why you're seeing a different narrative, right? I've heard the narrative many times. Adams has pushed this recently. Sharpton has pushed this recently. That Dinkins somehow was railroaded by I don't know who he was railroaded by, but I've heard from my father to other people. Well, the truth is, David Dinkins governed over the 4 highest crime years in the history of New York City. And by the way, that's not just in a 4-year stretch. That's the number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 highest crime years in the history of New York City. So there's a reason why he lost his job. But that's why, again, the numbers, the data is so important on this. And that's why, the next successful mayor, city council of New York will dust off that broken windows, that quality of life policing, and say, this is how we're successful. We can talk about how we might change a few things at the fringes. I understand that. But, that's the core of how you're going to safely police cities. And by the way, that's then how tourists and businesses come back. So that's the playbook right there. In the Super Bowl is coming up. I can tell you this: Andy Reid is not going to say, maybe the best thing to do is to bench Patrick Mahomes for this game. He seems to have worked so well for the last 6 years. Maybe we'll put him on the bench and we'll start our backup quarterback. No, he's going to ride with Patrick Mahomes. Well, if you want New York City to be safe, then you look at Rudy Giuliani's playbook and you figure out how to implement it.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. The thing that concerns me is, like you said, you have all these police officers that are retiring. So you have the institutional knowledge that's going away. You have the mentorship that's going away, where they could have served as good mentors to the new police officers. So the Democrats and the far left that have destroyed the police force, well, the police force may actually get worse because of the lower standards and they don't have real mentorship. So that's a problem. Now, Mayor Adams came out, ordered all city agencies at first to cut their budgets by 15% so that they could pay for the migrant crisis. He then revised it and said, all right, not the NYPD budget or the FDNY budget, because there was too much outrage there. But how much are New Yorkers getting shortchanged right now? I mean, if you come to this country and illegally, you get housing, you're getting health care. We've had 30,000 unaccompanied minors enrolling in the New York City public education system in 1 year. When you have that many students in a year enrolling, that's certainly going to bring down the quality of an already failed system. And now New Yorkers are going to have their services essentially cut by 15%. Now the city's arguing, well, it's not going to impact anybody's service. To me, then you've been overspending by 15% all these years. That's what that tells me. But when we actually look at it, like, you almost get penalized if you're an American citizen or a legal permanent resident that did the right thing. You're the ones getting punished. Are New Yorkers beginning to wake up to this?
I think so. I think they are. I don't know if that will be seen at the ballot box in 2025. I'm obviously, we have 2024, which is going to have major implications for the future of our country and, I believe, Western civilization. But if you take the next city elections and look at 2025, I don't know if it'll be seen at the ballot box. I mean, to me, I was disappointed to see that only 7% of New York City residents ended up voting in this last city council election in 2023, which, your vote probably
Isn't that pathetic? 7%.
It's completely pathetic. So, when I hear people complaining about it, I kind of say, look, somehow we didn't do our job. And look, I was screaming from the top of my lungs, campaigning with candidates, trying to do that, trying to get the message out there. But somehow it's not cutting through where enough New Yorkers are saying, well, you know what, I'm going to actually go register to vote and actually look at who's actually going out there and fighting for my quality of life. So it's, I don't know if it's going to reflect on the ballot box in 2025, but I do think you are starting to see things chip away at this point. Look, I've recently seen a poll that Trump was maybe within 9 points of Biden in the state of New York. I don't think New York is in play. I don't want to get anybody hopes up. I don't want to tell you that Trump's going to win New York, but I will say this: if it's single digits or even low double digits, it means he's probably going to win 350 electoral votes. And by my math, I know math is racist, but I can do at least a little bit of simple addition, subtraction, and multiplication. He needs 270 to be able to go and get back into the Oval Office. So I'm hopeful that enough New Yorkers are looking at this and seeing this for what it is, which is the beginning of complete chaos in the city. And it's not just New Yorkers, right? I mean, you're seeing in Chicago, Denver. I see Boston Logan Airport is being taken over as well. So, I mean, it seems like all of these cities, which have been, kind of these progressive harbors, really, that have declared that they're sanctuary cities, are now getting a dose of their own medicine. And I always talk to New Yorkers about this. Any New Yorker who says, well, this is Greg Abbott being a racist and doing this, I say, let's have perspective on this. New York is the biggest city in the country, or you can argue LA depending on the size of it, but New York's the biggest city, one of the two biggest cities in the country. The fact that 170,000 migrants, and now what we're housing is about 65 to 75,000 migrants at this moment that we're talking right now, has caused this much disruption in New York City. Can you imagine what the state of Texas has actually gone through with 9.7 million coming through? Like, to me, it's unbelievable. So I think it's just completely obvious to be able to go and look at this and say, this is a federal crisis. This is something that needs to be stopped at our borders, because we continue to go on this path over here. And I really don't know what the stopgap is. If you don't have a president in 2025 who believes in border security and it being one of the top issues of their administration, forget about campaign, but of how they're going to govern, then I don't know what New York City looks like in 2026, 27, 28. I don't know.
It looks like Escape from New York.
Yeah, it does. It does. You're right. Bring Kurt Russell back. You're absolutely right.
Now, and just so people know, the amount of people that Abbott has bussed up is only about 30 to 40,000. The rest of the people that are in New York City were actually flown here by the federal government. And Westchester Airport, Republic Airport on Long Island said they wanted to come to New York. So the actual vast majority of them would not bust from Abbott. More importantly, when I speak to people, and I speak to people from all political ideologies, I cannot find a single person that says, yeah, I'm satisfied with our officials in New York. They're doing a bang up job. I hope they keep going. Can't find this. Everyone's miserable. Everyone. It doesn't matter. Democrat, independent, libertarian, working families, Republican, everyone's miserable. But doesn't this reflect a failure of the Republican Party? Because I've been very critical of the Republicans that they've surrendered these areas to the Democrats. They've long ignored these areas. But more importantly, I'm seeing residents band together, giving press conferences, screaming and yelling. And I'm like, why isn't there a Republican official standing right behind them saying, we hear you, we're listening to you, give us a chance, we'll correct the situation. And if you don't like the job we do, then you can throw us out. But what you've been voting for the last 50, 60, 70 years isn't working, so give the chance. Doesn't it reflect a failure at the Republican apparatus that they don't go into these areas, particularly at this point where people have had it?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's a great point. And to me, the fact that Republicans couldn't have the 10 city council seats, at least 9 city council seats that would have helped the mayor override with this veto, to me was kind of a great example of that, right? So everybody looks and says, okay, well, what's a couple more city council seats when you have
Imagine we had a city council filled with Vicky Paladinos? We'd be in good shape.
Exactly. You're 100% right. And that's why I think you're absolutely right. And it's a good, it's a very, very good perspective on this, because I think one of the things that Curtis Lee was said when he was running for mayor, look, we have different opinions on presidential candidates. I'm obviously supported and worked for President Trump. He's not the biggest Trump guy and all that. But I got to tell you, one of the things and taglines that he used to say is, I'm going to go into these neighborhoods that haven't seen a Republican since Abraham Lincoln on a $5 bill. And I think it's absolutely right. I think there are a lot of the, let's say, Republican leaders that have just decided to not fight in these neighborhoods. And the other day I was at an event that had Republicans and Democrats at it. It was a swearing in, and AOC was there and was given the opportunity to speak. This is a Republican that was being inaugurated. And I thought to myself, I said, look, I think working across the aisles with Democrats in general is good. But when you're talking about a socialist, when you're talking about what socialism has actually done around the world over the last 150 years, and the hundreds of millions of souls that have been killed in the name of socialism or communism, this is a very, very dangerous ideal. And I thought that day, as I was watching her speak, I said, anybody who says that she's dumb, they're wrong. She's not dumb. She's smart and she's charming. And that's why she's so dangerous. And it was a perfect example of me of saying, I don't know if this Republican leadership in this city, it has the fight that they need in order to try to take this thing back. And the migrant crisis might be a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and I do think that Republicans do underestimate their opponents. I mean, listen, I make fun of Gavin Newsom all day long, but Gavin Newsom is a very slick governor. He is a
Yeah.
very slick politician, and he's handsome. He has a smile. He knows how to charm people, and he knows how to
Nick,
pull the wool over their eyes.
I look at Gavin Newsom as almost like the exact opposite of Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is a great he's a great governor in terms of here are the books. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to push, pressing the buttons. Does not understand how to communicate that message charismatically to the media, right? He doesn't understand that. Gavin Newsom is the exact opposite. One of the worst governors you could absolutely imagine. Just look at the state, look at what they've done. But you're right. He is charismatic. He knows how to laugh with someone like a Sean Hannity. He takes this pile of crap, which sadly the state of California has been turning into on his watch, and somehow wraps it up and ties it up in like this in this package. And he presents it to people, and people say, well, you know what? Look, I mean, he does look pretty good. He does seem to be convinced by what he's saying. So that's when I think Gavin Newsom, that's what I think of.
Yeah, these people are dangerous. And the hypocrisy is there for everyone to see. I mean, the fact that he was able to clear out the homeless encampments when the Chinese came and they were having the international meeting there. And then 2 weeks later, you see the homeless encampment back because all the foreign dignitaries left. It tells you everything you need to know. And I think what's important is that we don't see accountability in the system anymore. I think that's why it's gotten out of control. Now, you experience this firsthand because you've experienced the weaponization of government, that our agencies and departments have been ideologically corrupted by political partisans, and they're using the power of the bureaucracy to target political opponents. What are your thoughts on that?
It's of all the things that we talk about. To me, it's the scariest thing when you look at political activists that are now judges, as well as how our Federal Bureau of Investigation and our Department of Justice have been taken over by these political actors as we talk about it. And it's probably the thing that keeps me up the most at night, because I wonder how you end up rolling back a justice system that Americans can trust. Look, I know that there are people out there that are trying to convince other Americans that what President Trump, let's say, or his allies like Rudy Giuliani are going through is just the course of the legal system. But you just have to look at who's initiating this and who's executing this, who's going through all this. These are all elected Democrats that are doing this completely. And to me, if this isn't as obvious of a political ploy and push to try to make sure that President Trump can't run, or if he is running, I know he is running, obviously, but if he is the candidate, as it appears he's going to be, that they're going to try to disqualify him, then I don't really know what is. But this is the thing that scares me absolutely the most. And my thoughts are, how do you roll this back? How do you end up getting to the point where we can trust in blind justice and due process, and the ability for an individual to be able to defend themselves, and attorney-client privilege, not to mention anything of executive privilege. So that, of all things, I would say that and the education system are the two things. Education system as a father, I would say, and our justice system as an American who's seen this, really probably disturbed me the most.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I mean, to me, people are worried about President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm like, no, they're going to be gone sooner or later, whether it's in a year from now or 5 years from now. They will be gone. The bureaucracy is remaining. The bureaucracy will still be here. And when the bureaucracy abuses its power, it's almost like when Chuck Schumer warned President Trump, if you go after the intelligence community, they have 6 ways of Sunday to get back at you. That terrified me because he is someone that has the power of oversight over these government agencies. And the fact that he said that, and I don't think he was being an a-hole saying it to Trump. He was like giving him almost a warning and a heads up. Like, these are powerful entities. Now, what do you see?
But one more thing before you move on. I was with President Trump a couple days after Judge Engeron. This is a couple months ago. told him, who, by the way, is not just the judge, but is the jury in this particular Letitia James case that they've brought against Trump. Letitia James, obviously, who campaigned on, I'm going to go get Trump, right?
And the one where
But
the banks testified that they actually wanted to do more business with Trump.
yes, that's exactly right. That he paid on time, he did all this stuff. That's exactly right. And Engeron at one point told him, I'm not here to listen to you. And I let the president know a couple days later, I said, I think if you can break everything that we've seen over the last couple of years down into one phrase, into one statement, it's by that activist judge who said, I'm not here to listen to you. Because whatever I think about you, President Trump, he is here to listen to you. He's your judge. And in fact, he is your jury in this particular instance. So he absolutely is there to listen to you. And when you have judges in that senior role that's determining a case that's that important to our country, and they on the stand while the witness is on the stand says, "I didn't come here to listen to you," that to me, at a time when it's very difficult to blow my mind, that blew my mind.
Well, it's what I say now, that the public servants forgot who they are there to serve. They now believe that public service means to rule over rather than serve the public. That's
Yeah.
what it comes down to. But for you, what's next on the horizon for you? What do you have planned for this year?
Well, look, I'm going to try to do everything I possibly can to make sure President Trump is the 45th president, 47th president. Our 45th president is the 47th president. I think as we talk about
So
what
you're no go on Haley?
I'm no go on
Okay.
Haley. If that shocked you enough that I'm no go on Haley, no, I am 100% in President Trump's corner. When I look at what I was a small part of the administration, but when I look at what the administration did over those 4 years and the groundwork that it laid, I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing the backlash by so much of the establishment, whether it's the intelligence agencies, whether it's our judicial system, whether it's even some establishment Republicans, sadly enough. So for me, I think we need 4 more years of President Trump. And then we need to figure out, okay, well, how can you build upon that? How can we make sure, again, that we have public servants that understand that their role is not to enrich themselves or their families. It's to go out there and actually serve the public, to commit to the Constitution, to make sure that America has its sovereign borders, and to make sure we keep on with this incredible experiment that is the United States of America. So, I'm going to figure out whatever I possibly can do to help President Trump, that is, over the next 9 months, because I look at the future of our country and I know it depends on it.
Yeah, and again, I'll just take it back to the 1990s. As bad as things were, it actually turned around fairly quickly with new leadership, and the same thing could happen now. So there's no need to be pessimistic about America's future when you know that things could quickly turn around with the right leadership and the will to actually make change.
And I
And
think,
go ahead.
Nick, I think in some way too, obviously, what happened in 2020, putting that aside, I think in some ways, the fact that we've seen what's happened over the last 3 years, if President Trump can in fact win in 2024, I think we have a completely new vision of what actually the establishment in Washington, D.C. Actually has for this country, the ideas they have for this country that maybe we would not have known if there were 2 consecutive terms of Trump. So I expect a Trump administration to come in January of 2025 with a focus to make sure that they are doing everything they possibly can to push America first in every single way.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it's the most difficult job in the world. And the first time you're elected in, it's not like you could train to be a president. It's not like you
Yeah.
could read a book and learn to be president. You learn by doing. And so you'd definitely be better prepared going in the next time as opposed to the first time. And obviously, there is a universal undertaking that has to happen because of the disasters that have unfolded in just the 3 short years of the Biden administration, which maybe we needed that. Maybe this was needed to serve as a wake-up call, to show Americans how easy things can be lost.
Yeah, you might be right. It's, you know, just taking a look, let's say, at border policy right there. The fact that Biden didn't look at this and say, you know what, maybe I campaigned against Trump, maybe I said this on the campaign trail, but this is actually effectively working and we should implement this in some type of capacity, rename it or whatever you want to do, just shows, I think, how delusional this entire administration is. You look at energy policy and what they did, canceling Keystone in the first week. That also ultimately makes us more reliant on the Irans and the Chinas and the Russias of the world. Look at foreign policy. I mean, the fact that I always looked at the fact that they would call Trump a Russian agent one of the biggest jokes that I've ever seen, because you can just look at the Obama years. You could see that Russia annexes Crimea, right? Then you get 4 years of Trump. Uh, Russia doesn't take a step forward. You have 31 different sanctions, major sanctions that Trump ends up putting on Russia. Then Biden comes in, and
He
within
gets
a year,
European countries to kick in more money to NATO. NATO and Russia despises NATO. I mean, just all the
absolutely,
policy. He floods the oil in the markets to bring down the prices, hurting Russia's economy. It was hysterical when they used to say Russian agent.
100%. And now you have Biden, who sadly, this, another war has started within a year of his administration, basically a year of his administration. So, yeah, it's things need to change here this November. If they don't, then I don't know what it looks like in 2025 if you have a second term of Biden or whoever might be the Democratic nominee.
And as someone that's a father to a young girl, as someone that has two sons, it certainly is concerning. Andrew, I really appreciate you taking time to come on, speak to the audience. We're going to have links up to the Andrew Giuliani show on the PAS Report website, pasreport.com. Thanks so much for coming on, Andrew.
Well, Nick, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work.